Nike is the world's reigning footwear brand. They have sales amounting over $51 billion in the past year alone. The company's market capitalization, also known as its valuation, is $144 billion, making them the 98th largest company globally by market cap. Nike does not need a lot of introduction. They are a name that is known by nearly everyone globally. Yet, have you ever wondered where Nike's footwear are made? Well, according to Nike's annual report in 2021, over 51% of Nike's footwear was produced in Southeast Asia. And that number has only increased over the years. Southeast Asia is the base for Nike's famous products. It is not across India or Bangladesh. Neither is across South America, but here in Southeast Asia. Out of the entire region, however, there is also only one country that actually takes up a lot of this share, and that is Vietnam. In 2022, Vietnam manufactured over 44% of Nike's footwear and 26% of their apparel products. That puts them ahead of both China and Indonesia, two countries that are also major manufacturers of Nike products. The reason why this is so important is because of the economic impact of Nike to Vietnam. Most of the time, when we talk about the economic impact of a foreign investor, we are often led to technology companies. We look at South Korea's Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, two companies that are investing billions into Vietnam. Yet, we forget about the other investors. These are investors that are also crucial, and part of the reason why Vietnam is amongst the fastest growing economies globally. Data from Nike's manufacturing map showcases that their base in Vietnam has helped create over 476,437 workers and spread across 123 factories. For one company to have an impact on nearly 500,000 workers should definitely put them into one of the most essential pieces of Vietnam's economy. The people who found jobs because of Nike are now able to feed their family and contribute to their communities. To understand and appreciate their contribution, let's talk about their history in the country. Their history is essential for people to understand how much of an impact they have given to the economy over decades and the mistakes and problems they incurred along the way. Nike Vietnam was first established in 1995. Their presence, while new, was big. 4 years later, in 1999, Nike Vietnam's share of the country's gross domestic product reached 5%. Unfortunately, the company was immediately plunged into a big labor scandal. Many accused them of failing to prevent violation of the labor code in their first few years in the country. What happened started off in the 5 factories they used. They were mostly owned by Korean and Taiwanese subcontractors. They were employing 35,000 people, mostly young women who left their village farms in search of a better tomorrow. One of these factories is known as the Tai Quang Vuna Factory Phi T. VT became operational in 1995, the same year Nike was established in Vietnam. But the place achieved the reputation of a bad place to work. Workers at VT were forced to work beyond legal overtime limits nearly every day, earning insufficient wages of around $40 monthly. They faced verbal and physical abuse from managers and worked in unhygienic conditions. Local residents avoided VT, so the factory relied on migrant labor. A 1997 Ernst & Young audit found 104 underage workers, violating national labor laws. The factory also ignored environmental regulations, with no local community nearby to complain. The Tai Quang Vina company controlled the workers' union, and the transient migrant workforce had little connection to the local community, making protests unlikely. Nike claimed limited control over VT due to subcontracting and the Vietnamese government's eagerness to attract foreign investment, complicating regulation. However, human rights activists in cities like Portland, San Francisco, and New York organized campaigns against labor conditions in sweatshops. By April 1998, protests and pickets spread across the US and Europe. International NGOs like Global Exchange pressured Nike to improve labor conditions at its Asian subcontractors. This led Nike to declare a pledge to eliminate toxic solvents, comply with US workplace laws, and use water-based adhesives, achieving 95% usage by 2001. Nike aimed for zero waste in footwear production by 2020. By December 1998, conditions at the VT factory improved significantly, with health issues dropping from 86% to 18%, and increased health awareness. In 1999, Nike introduced a code of conduct based on ILO conventions to protect workers' rights. By 2001, 85% of Nike factories offered education programs with plans for full coverage. Nike also launched a micro-enterprise loan program to benefit 1,000 Vietnamese families and local communities. Amidst these issues, Nike Vietnam still helped the economy. Nike was responsible for 35,000 jobs and 4% of Vietnam's total exports in 1998. By 2005, Nike had expanded to 9 footwear and 30 apparel factories, employing over 130,000 Vietnamese citizens. In 2004, Nike's exports from Vietnam were nearly $782 million, 3% of the country's total exports. By 2000, Vietnam and the US trade talks would cause fear amongst Vietnamese workers. They feared that they would lose their jobs. Nike said that it won't cut its workforce, but acknowledges that its future in Vietnam is uncertain due to delays in a trade agreement with the US. This agreement, initially settled in July, has been stalled by Vietnamese negotiators. The agreement would cut import duties from 35%, making Vietnam a viable manufacturing hub for Nike's American market. This could increase Nike's production in Vietnam from 12% to 15%, potentially adding nearly 20,000 jobs. Nike's long-term plans in Vietnam hinge on the trade agreement, which would significantly impact the company's operations and worker conditions. The Vietnamese government is also considering reducing the work week, a move Nike cautiously monitors but does not actively oppose, given the broader implications for Vietnam's competitiveness. 8 years later, over 20,000 workers at a Taiwanese-owned factory in Vietnam that produces shoes for Nike have gone on strike, demanding higher pay to cope with rising inflation. The average monthly salary at the plant is $59, 14% above the minimum wage. The workers, who make about 12% of the 75 million pairs of Nike shoes produced annually in Vietnam, are asking for a 20% pay rise and better canteen lunches. Strikes would repeat again in 2010, when workers went on a strike due to poor working conditions and low wages. Even after a 5% wage increase, dissatisfaction persisted. 2 years later, in 2012, Vietnam would produce over 41% of Nike's footwear, surpassing China's 32% share. They were attracted by Vietnam's low labor costs. Labor costs in Vietnam back then were about 50% lower than in China, which significantly contributed to Vietnam becoming the leading producer of Nike footwear in 2010, surpassing China. Unfortunately, Nike Vietnam's issues with labor would continue for years. They would see another problem in the mid-2010s, when an investigation by the Workers' Rights Consortium, WRC, and Fair Labor Association, FLA, revealed poor working conditions. It is as if, despite the scandals and audits, working conditions failed to improve. In 2015, 26 CSR audits were conducted at the 12 factories in the Korean Run complex, with 8,000 workers, yet violations persisted. Issues included wage theft, illegal recruitment fees, verbal and physical abuse, pregnancy discrimination, forced overtime, restricted access to toilets, denial of sick leave, union interference, and health and safety hazards. Another major problem would rise a decade later. In 2021, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, Vietnam was amongst the strictest places to be in. They would shut down cities and factories alike. Their factory in Vietnam was affected severely. It would take a few months before production would start again. The impacts varied. Some analysts stated that these shutdowns affect workers and their livelihoods, as well as the global garment and shoe industries they supply. Prolonged lockdowns in Vietnam could mean prices for goods like Nike shoes to rise. On top of that, Nike said in a recent earnings call during these COVID times that it expected supply chain shortages and higher logistics costs to persist. Surprisingly, even though their production has halted or was downgraded, Nike said they were still committed to investing into Vietnam. This showcases that even if there is a pandemic out there, Nike would still choose Vietnam as a place for investments. In 2021, Vietnam would reign supreme as Nike's main source of shoe production after it accounted for over 51%, surpassing China's share, which dropped to 21%. In 2006, China produced 35% of Nike's shoes. Indonesia also overtook China, with its share increasing from 21% to 26% over the past 15 years. But what makes Nike Vietnam's investment so significant is also because Nike's competitor, Adidas, is following a similar trend. Adidas produces over 40% of its footwear in the Southeast Asian country. This showcases how big of an impact Nike had in Vietnam. Not only was it a big investor, but its competitors wanted in as well. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.